Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking what is basically one of the most complex heists in human history. We're going to look at how a single private corporation managed to transform a nation, one that held 25% of the world's wealth, by the way, into a site of massive, systemic extraction. We are going to break down exactly how this happened by digging deep into the historical evidence. Let's get right into it.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the lure of the golden bird, trace the unbelievable rise of the East India Company, examine the draining of wealth and culture, and then finally look at the Great Mutiny and the dawn of the British Raj.
Section 1. The Lure of the Golden Bird. What did India actually look like before colonialism?
Get this. Up until the 16th century, India single-handedly accounted for 25% of the entire world's GDP. To put that into perspective, that is basically like combining the modern economies of the United States and Japan today. Through centuries of exporting these incredibly high-value goods, things like spices, intricate cotton textiles, and wood steel, India was a massive global powerhouse, and frankly, and totally irresistible magnet for European expansion.
So why on earth would anyone risk crossing dangerous oceans back then? Well, it was kind of a perfect storm of motivations. You had these fierce political rivalries between nations like Spain, Portugal, France, and Britain, which meant whoever controlled the new trade routes essentially controlled the future. Add in religious zeal to spread Christianity and this insatiable scientific curiosity to map the unknown, and you've got a potent recipe for global colonial expansion.
Now, this invasion of interests, it was chaotic from day one. When Vasco da Gama landed in 1498, let me tell you, it was not a peaceful handshake. By 1560, the Portuguese had already launched the brutal Goa Inquisition. But the Europeans absolutely did not go unchallenged. In 1741, King Marthanda Varma of Travancore completely crushed the Dutch at Calichel, a stunning, decisive victory over European military. Ultimately, though, through the Carnatic Wars, it was the British who fought their way to the top of the food chain.
Moving on to Section 2. From traders to rulers. How did a trading company pull this off?
I want you to imagine, just for a second, a modern megacorporation being granted its own private, heavily armed military by the government. Sounds crazy, right? Well, that was the Royal Charter of 1600. Queen Elizabeth gave the East India Company a total monopoly. They entered India under the guise of being these humble merchants, just asking for a few coastal warehouses, all while secretly building up a formidable military capacity designed strictly for conquest.
The real grand deception, the game changer, happened at the Battle of Plassey in 1757. The British had built these unauthorized forts in Bengal, so the 25-year-old Nawab, Siraj-ud-Daulah, stepped in to stop them. But British commander Robert Clive, he didn't win through sheer military genius. He won through bribery. By paying off the Nawab's top commander, Mir Jafar, Clive made sure the local forces just stood down. That single act of treachery handed a private company control of India's absolute richest province, literally overnight. Now, to swallow up the rest of the subcontinent without fighting endless, super expensive wars, the British engineered these brilliant but absolutely ruthless legal traps. The subsidiary alliance literally forced Indian kings to disband their own armies and pay the British to protect them. It basically turned them into powerless puppets. Then came the doctrine of lapse. If a ruler died without a male heir, boom! Their kingdom was instantly swallowed by the British. No wars required, just paperwork and extortion.
Section 3. The drain of wealth and famines. Let's look at the human toll.
You see, the East India Company didn't treat locals as citizens. They treated them as raw revenue. They imposed taxes of up to 50%, and they absolutely refused to lower those quotas even during severe droughts. The human cost here was honestly apocalyptic. The 1770 Bengal famine wiped out 10 million people. That's a third of the region. The 1876 famine killed 8 million more. In total, these artificially engineered colonial famines claimed between 50 and 100 million lives. And the wildest part? Indian grain was actively being loaded onto ships and exported to Britain while this was happening.
So, where did all that extracted wealth go? Economists estimate the modern value of this drain at a truly staggering $45 trillion. Yes, trillion with a T. This wasn't just basic tax collection, it was forced deindustrialization. Indian weavers and manufacturers were deliberately taxed out of existence so raw Indian materials could be shipped off to fuel the European Industrial Revolution. And then, those finished products were sold right back to Indians at an extortionate premium.
Okay, Section 4. Assaults on education and culture.
Before colonial rule, Indian society was deeply anchored by local panchayats. Even a British official, Charles Metcalfe, referred to them as self-sustaining little republics that easily outlasted passing dynasties. But colonial rule demands total compliance, so they completely dismantled this deeply rooted local governance. In its place, they installed a cold, rigid, centralized bureaucracy built for one singular purpose: maximum tax extraction.
To maintain that kind of control, you kind of have to convince the colonized that their culture is inferior. Just listen to this arrogant 1835 quote from Thomas Macaulay. It perfectly encapsulates the deep cultural subjugation used to justify dismantling local knowledge systems. He pushed a document called the Minutes on Indian Education, and the goal was explicitly to create a class of people who were Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, opinions, morals, and intellect.
The real-world impact of Macaulay's philosophy was devastatingly immediate. Traditional gurukuls and madrasas, which taught diverse arts, sciences, and independent trades, were systematically defunded and destroyed. They were completely replaced by this rigid English-medium schooling obsessed with rote memorization and board exams. The goal was never enlightenment, guys. It was to strip away independent thought and manufacture a compliant generation of clerks just to manage the empire's endless paperwork.
Section 5. The Uprisings and the 1857 Mutiny. The inevitable breaking point.
There's this super common myth that Indians just quietly accepted colonial rule until 1857. Absolutely not true. Resistance was a constant. In the 1770s, you had ascetic monks leading the Sannyasi Fakir rebellion. In the 1800s, indigenous tribes like the Kols and Santals launched fierce uprisings to protect their ancestral forests. And even after the Great Rebellion, farmers launched the 1859 Indigo Revolt to destroy the Tinkatia system. That system literally forced them to poison their own fertile soil by growing indigo.
And the Great Rebellion of 1857 itself? It wasn't just a simple military mutiny. It united a wildly diverse array of heroes. It sparked with Mongol Pandey down in Barakpur. It reached Delhi, elevating the 80-year-old Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar II as its figurehead. Over in Jhansi, Rani Lakshmi Bai rode straight into battle to fight the laws trying to steal her kingdom. And in Awadh, Begum Hazrat Mahal flat-out rejected British bribes and safe passage, choosing instead to fiercely defend her territory.
Which brings us to Section 6, the dawn of the British Raj, a completely new era of control. The sheer scale of that 1857 rebellion proved one thing for sure: the East India Company could no longer maintain control without heavy reliance on the British National Army. So, because of this, the Government of India Act of 1858 dissolved the megacorporation entirely. India transitioned from a corporate asset into a direct subject of Queen Victoria. While this did stop the aggressive annexations, it formalized an era of absolute, unyielding British control over the subcontinent.
So what's the legacy of all this? Well, it's deeply, deeply complex. On one hand, you have brutal deindustrialization, systemic wealth extraction, and stolen cultural artifacts, like the famous Kohinoor diamond. But on the other hand, the vast infrastructure built purely to extract resources unintentionally ended up integrating the nation. And ironically, the shared trauma and administrative unity of colonial rule planted the very seeds of Indian nationalism that would eventually overthrow it.
I want to leave you with this one super provocative thought to ponder today. Think about it. If that staggering $45 trillion and the tens of millions of lives lost to preventable famines had remained in their rightful home to build local industries, schools, and communities, what would the map of global economic power look like today? It's a question that forces us to completely rethink modern history. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning and keep learning.